The Montana sun hung low in the September sky, casting long shadows across the dusty trail, as Samuel Morrison urged his aging mare forward. The leather of his worn saddle creaked with each step, a familiar sound that had accompanied him through countless lonely rides across the territory. At 42, Sam carried himself with the weathered dignity of a man who had spent half his life fighting the harsh realities of frontier living. His ranch, the Circle M, stretched across 3,000 acres of some of the most beautiful and unforgiving land God had ever created. The rolling hills were painted gold by the autumn grass, and the distant peaks of the Rockies stood like silent sentinels against the horizon. But beauty didn't pay debts, and Sam knew that without a strong stallion to improve his breeding stock, another harsh winter might be the end of everything he'd worked to build. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of coming rain and the distant sound of cattle lowing. Sam pulled his brown leather coat tighter around his broad shoulders, his steel-gray eyes scanning the landscape ahead. 3 more miles to the Hartwell place, where old Theodore Hartwell was rumored to have the finest horses this side of the Yellowstone River. Sam's weathered hands gripped the reins as his mind wandered to the letter folded in his shirt pocket. The bank in Billings had been patient, but patience had its limits. The mortgage payment was due in 6 weeks, and selling his prized Aberdeen Angus cattle wouldn't be enough. He needed to expand his operation, and that meant investing in better breeding stock, even if it meant spending money he couldn't afford to lose. The trail curved around a stand of cottonwood trees, their leaves already beginning to turn yellow with the approaching autumn. As Sam crested a small hill, the Hartwell Ranch spread out before him like something from a painting. The main house was a 2-story structure built of local timber and stone, with a wide porch that spoke of prosperity and permanence. Several outbuildings dotted the property, a massive red barn, a bunkhouse for the hands, and various sheds and corrals that housed what everyone said was the finest livestock operation in 3 counties. Theodore Hartwell had built his fortune on horses and cattle, but it was his reputation for fair dealing that had brought Sam this far from home. In a territory where a man's word was often all that stood between life and death, Hartwell's handshake was considered as good as any contract drawn up by city lawyers. As Sam approached the main house, he noticed an unusual quiet about the place. No ranch hands moved about their duties, no horses grazed in the near pastures. The only sounds were the creaking of a windmill and the distant barking of a dog. He dismounted at the hitching post near the front porch, his boots hitting the packed earth with a solid thud. "Hello, the house!" Sam called out, following the frontier custom of announcing his arrival. The front door opened, and Theodore Hartwell himself stepped onto the porch. At 65, Hartwell was still an imposing figure, though Sam could see the years had taken their toll. His once black hair was now completely silver, and deep lines etched his face like a roadmap of hard-earned experience. "Sam Morrison," Hartwell's voice carried genuine warmth, "got your message about needing a stallion. Come up here, and let's talk business properly." The 2 men shook hands with the firm grip of those who understood that trust was the foundation of all frontier commerce. Hartwell's eyes, still sharp and intelligent, studied Sam with the careful attention of a man who had learned to read character as easily as brands on cattle. "Coffee's hot," Hartwell said, gesturing toward the door. "My Maria makes it strong enough to wake the dead." As they settled into chairs on the porch, each man holding a steaming cup of the promised strong coffee, Sam felt some of his tension ease. This was the rhythm of ranch business. Coffee first, then honest talk between men who understood the weight of their responsibilities. Chapter 2. An Unexpected Discovery. "I won't lie to you, Sam," Hartwell began, his weathered hands wrapped around his coffee cup. "I've got 3 stallions that might suit your needs, but they ain't cheap. That Black Arabian I wrote you about, he's got bloodlines that go back to the finest stock in Kentucky, but he'll cost you $1,500. Sam felt his stomach tighten. $1,500 was more than he'd hoped, but if the horse was everything Hartwell claimed, it could transform his breeding program within 3 years. "I'd like to see him," Sam said carefully, "and hear about the others." Hartwell nodded approvingly. "A smart man looks before he leaps. The stallions are in the back pasture, but first let me show you the facilities. You'll want to know your investment will be properly cared for during the breeding season." The 2 men rose and began walking toward the large red barn that dominated the ranch's skyline. As they walked, Hartwell pointed out improvements he'd made to his operation: a new water system that ensured fresh water year-round, reinforced corrals that could handle even the most spirited horses, and a feed storage system that protected valuable grain from both weather and vermin. The key to good breeding, Hartwell explained as they approached the barn, is controlling every variable you can: feed, water, shelter, and most importantly, the temperament of your stock. A mean-spirited stallion might throw strong foals, but they'll likely inherit his disposition along with his strength. The barn's interior was impressive. Spacious stalls lined both sides of a wide central aisle, and the smell of fresh hay and well-maintained leather filled the air. Sunlight streamed through carefully placed windows, creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere that spoke of genuine care for the animals housed there. "I need to check on something in the back," Hartwell said, excusing himself. "Take a look around. You'll find everything clean and well organized. I'll be right back." Sam wandered through the barn, impressed by the attention to detail evident everywhere he looked. Each stall was spacious and clean, with fresh water and hay. The tack room held saddles and bridles that showed the wear of regular use but were meticulously maintained. This was the operation of a man who understood that success came from caring for the details that others might overlook. As he emerged from the barn's rear door, Sam intended to find Hartwell and continue their discussion of the stallions, but as he rounded the corner of the old storage barn that sat behind the main structure, he stopped dead in his tracks. There, huddled against the weathered wood of the barn's back wall, was a young woman. She was naked, her dark hair matted and dirty, her body covered with bruises and cuts that spoke of recent violence. She had drawn her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them in a desperate attempt at modesty and protection. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs that seemed to come from the very depths of her soul. For a moment, Sam stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Then his instincts kicked in, the same protective impulses that had helped him survive 2 decades on the frontier. Without hesitation, he shrugged out of his heavy coat and approached slowly, his hands visible and his voice gentle. "Ma'am," he said softly, stopping several feet away to avoid frightening her further. "I'm not going to hurt you. Let me help." The woman's head snapped up, her dark eyes wide with terror. She pressed herself harder against the barn wall, as if she could somehow disappear into the wood itself. Sam could see she was young, probably no more than 25, with the delicate features and olive skin that suggested Mexican heritage. The fear in her eyes was so profound it made his heart ache. "My name is Sam Morrison," he continued in the same gentle tone he used with spooked horses. "I'm going to put this coat down here for you. Then I'm going to step back and find Mr. Hartwell. You're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." He placed his coat on the ground between them, then slowly backed away until he was out of sight around the corner of the barn. His mind raced as he tried to understand what he'd stumbled into. The woman's injuries were fresh, her terror genuine. Someone had hurt her badly and recently. "Hartwell," Sam called out, his voice carrying an urgency that brought the older rancher running. "What is it, Sam? You sound like—" "There's a woman behind your old barn," Sam interrupted. "She's hurt bad and she needs help immediately." The expression that crossed Theodore Hartwell's face was one Sam would remember for the rest of his life, a mixture of relief, concern, and something that might have been guilt. Chapter 3. Secrets Revealed. Theodore Hartwell's weathered face went pale as he absorbed Sam's words. For a moment, the older rancher seemed to age another decade, his shoulders sagging under an invisible weight. "Jesus Christ," Hartwell whispered, running a trembling hand through his silver hair. "I was hoping she'd gotten further away by now." He looked up at Sam with eyes that held a mixture of shame and determination. "Sam, what I'm about to tell you, it could get us both killed if the wrong people find out." The 2 men hurried toward the back of the barn, but Hartwell stopped Sam before they rounded the corner. "Her name is Elena Martinez," he said in low, urgent tones. 3 nights ago she escaped from a wagon train that was, well, let's just say it wasn't carrying legitimate cargo. She made it here more dead than alive." Sam felt his jaw tighten as the implications became clear. Human trafficking was a plague that had followed the railroad west, preying on desperate immigrants and young women with nowhere else to turn. "You should have taken her to the sheriff," he said, though even as he spoke, he knew why Hartwell hadn't. "Sheriff Morrison is in the pocket of the Carmichael brothers," Hartwell replied bitterly. "They run half the illegal operations between here and Denver. Taking her to town would be signing her death warrant." He met Sam's eyes directly. "I've been trying to figure out how to get her to safety, but I'm being watched. That's why my hands are all gone today. I sent them to the north pasture to keep them away from here." They approached the corner where Sam had left his coat. Elena had wrapped herself in the heavy garment, but she was still pressed against the barn wall, her eyes darting between the two men like a cornered animal. When she saw Hartwell, some of the raw terror in her expression eased, but she remained poised to flee. "Elena," Hartwell said gently in Spanish, his voice taking on a fatherly tone. "Este es Sam Morrison. Es un buen hombre. Puedes confiar en él." This is Sam Morrison. He's a good man. You can trust him. Elena's dark eyes studied Sam's face with an intensity that made him feel exposed. He could see intelligence there along with the fear. This was a woman who had learned to read men's intentions for survival. After a long moment, she nodded slightly and spoke in heavily accented English. "Thank you for the coat," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am sorry you had to see me like this." "Ma'am, you've got nothing to apologize for," Sam replied, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "The only people who should be sorry are the ones who hurt you." Hartwell knelt down beside a wooden crate and pulled out a bundle of women's clothing, a simple brown dress, undergarments, and worn boots. "My late wife's things," he explained to Sam, then addressed Elena. "Mijita, you need to get dressed and eat something. Mr. Morrison and I need to figure out how to keep you safe." Elena clutched the clothes to her chest, her eyes filling with tears that spoke of gratitude too deep for words. "Senor Hartwell, I cannot stay here much longer. They will come looking. The man who owned me, he will not give up easily." The word "owned" hit Sam like a physical blow. In all his years on the frontier, he had seen plenty of cruelty and injustice, but the casual way she referred to her enslavement ignited a rage in his chest that surprised him with its intensity. "How many men are we talking about?" Sam asked, his voice harder than he'd intended. "The Carmichael brothers have maybe a dozen men," Hartwell answered. "But they're not the real problem. Eleanor escaped from a wagon belonging to Marcus Brennan." He paused, letting the name sink in. "You've heard of him?" Sam had indeed heard of Marcus Brennan. The man was a legend of the worst kind, a former Confederate officer who had turned his military skills toward building a criminal empire that stretched from Texas to the Canadian border. Brennan's operations included everything from cattle rustling to human trafficking, and he was known for his particular cruelty toward those who crossed him. "Brennan was taking her to San Francisco," Hartwell continued. "She was supposed to be entertainment for some wealthy clients there. When she escaped, she didn't just steal property. She stole a significant investment." Elena had been listening to their conversation while gathering the courage to stand and dress. Now she spoke up, her voice stronger despite her obvious exhaustion. "There were 6 other girls in that wagon, Mexican girls like me. All of us were bought from our families during the drought last year." Her voice broke slightly. "My little sister Maria was supposed to be in the next wagon. I do not know if she is alive." Sam felt something shift inside him as he watched this brave young woman struggle to maintain her dignity while recounting her nightmare. He had spent so many years focused on his own survival, his own problems, that he had forgotten what it felt like to care about someone else's pain. But looking at Elena, seeing the strength it took for her to even speak about her ordeal, he felt a protective instinct awaken that he hadn't experienced since his younger days. "How long before Brennan's men start searching this area?" Sam asked Hartwell. "Could be any time. They hit the Murphy Ranch yesterday asking questions. Word is they're offering a $1,000 reward for information leading to her capture." Hartwell's expression was grim. "That's more money than most folks around here see in 5 years. Elena managed to stand, still wrapped in Sam's coat, and looked directly at him. "Senor Morrison, I do not want to bring trouble to you. You seem like a good man, and good men should not suffer for the problems of others." "Ma'am," Sam replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice, "sometimes a man has to decide what kind of person he wants to be, and I've decided that I can't walk away from someone who needs help." Chapter 4. A Dangerous Alliance. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the western mountains, the 3 unlikely allies found themselves gathered around Hartwell's kitchen table, the weight of their situation settling over them like a heavy blanket. Eleanor sat wrapped in Sam's coat over the simple brown dress, her hair still damp from the washing Hartwell had insisted she have time for. Despite the fear that flickered in her dark eyes, there was something else there now, a spark of hope that hadn't been present when Sam first found her. Hartwell had prepared a simple meal of beans, cornbread and coffee, but Elena could barely manage more than a few bites. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the cup to her lips, and Sam noticed the raw rope burns around her wrists where she had clearly struggled against her bonds. "Eleanor," Sam said gently, "I need to ask you some questions. I know it's hard, but if we're going to help you, we need to understand exactly what we're up against." She nodded, setting down her coffee cup with careful precision. "I will tell you what I can, Senor Morrison. How did you escape from Brennan's men?" Elena's eyes grew distant as she remembered. "We had been traveling for 8 days. Every night they would choose one of us." She paused, gathering strength. "On the 3rd night, it was my turn. The man who took me, he drank too much whiskey afterward. He forgot to tie the ropes properly." She rolled up the sleeves of the dress, revealing more bruises along her arms. "I waited until they were all asleep. Then I cut the other girls free with a knife I stole from the cook wagon. But only 3 of us made it out of the camp. The others were too afraid, or too hurt to run." "What happened to the other 2 who escaped with you?" Hartwell asked. "Rosa and Carmen. We stayed together for the first day, but then we heard the dogs. We knew they were tracking us, so we split up. Rosa went south toward the river. Carmen headed east toward the railroad. I came north toward the mountains." Elena's voice was steady, but Sam could see the cost of maintaining that composure. "I have not seen them since. I pray they found safety." Sam leaned back in his chair, his mind working through the tactical situation. "How many men were with the wagon train?" 8 men with our wagon plus Senor Brennan himself. He had 2 other wagons, but I do not know how many men were with those." Elena met his eyes directly. "Senor Morrison, these are not ordinary criminals. They are organized, well-armed, and they know this territory. Brennan has contacts everywhere, in the towns, at the railroads, even in some sheriff's offices. Which is why we can't just take her to the authorities," Hartwell added. "Half of them are already on Brennan's payroll, and the other half are too afraid to cross him." Sam stood and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the lengthening shadows across the ranch yard. In the distance, he could see storm clouds gathering over the mountains. The weather would turn soon, which could work either for or against them. "There's a place," Sam said slowly, turning back to face them. "My ranch borders on some of the roughest country in Montana. There are canyons up there that most folks don't even know exist. If we could get Elena there, she could hide until we figure out a more permanent solution." "That's still dangerous," Hartwell pointed out. "Brennan's men are good trackers, and winter's coming. She can't survive up there indefinitely." "It doesn't have to be indefinite," Sam replied, an idea beginning to form in his mind. "There's a circuit judge named Harrison who comes through Billings twice a year. He's one of the few honest lawmen left in this territory. If we can keep Elena safe until his next circuit, she could testify about Brennan's operation." Elena looked between the 2 men, hope and fear warring in her expression. "You would do this for me? Risk your lives for a stranger?" "Ma'am," Sam said, settling back into his chair, "my daddy used to say that a man is judged not by what he does when people are watching, but by what he does when no one will ever know. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I never did care much for bullies." Hartwell nodded his agreement. "The question is timing. If we wait too long, Brennan's search will tighten around this area. But if we move too soon, we might run straight into his men." "I have been thinking about this," Elena said quietly. "There is something you should know about Brennan. He is not just looking for me because of the money I represent. I heard things while I was captive. Names, places, plans. I know about other operations, other girls who are being held. If I could testify to Judge Harrison, it would not just be about me. It could help many others." Sam felt that familiar surge of protective anger, but this time it was tempered by something else, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. His struggles with the ranch, his loneliness, his financial problems, suddenly they all seemed smaller in comparison to the chance to make a real difference in the world. "Then we get you to safety," he said firmly. "Whatever it takes." Outside, the wind was picking up, rattling the windows and carrying the scent of approaching rain. In the distance, barely audible over the weather, came the sound of horses moving fast across the prairie. All 3 of them froze, listening intently. The hoofbeats were getting closer, and there were definitely multiple riders approaching at a gallop. "Brennan's men?" Sam asked in a whisper. Hartwell was already moving toward a rifle rack near the door. "Could be. Or it could be some of my hands coming back early." He paused, listening more carefully. 4 horses, maybe 5. "That's too many to be my boys." Elena had gone pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles showed white. "They found me," she whispered. I brought this on you. I am so sorry. Nobody's found anybody yet, Sam said firmly, moving to Elena's side. Hartwell, is there a back way out of here? Root cellar beneath the kitchen floor. It connects to a tunnel that leads to the old mine shaft about 50 yards behind the house. My grandfather dug it during the Indian Wars. The sound of hoofbeats was now clearly audible in the yard, accompanied by the jingle of spurs and the creak of leather. Sam could hear voices, men calling to each other with the casual authority of those accustomed to getting their way through force. Elena, Sam said urgently, you need to get to that cellar now. Chapter 5. The Stand at Hartwell Ranch. The riders had stopped in the front yard, their voices carrying clearly through the evening air. Sam counted at least 4 distinct speakers, all with the hard edge of professional gunmen. Elena had disappeared through the trapdoor into Hartwell's root cellar, and the older rancher was calmly checking his rifle, while Sam positioned himself near a window where he could observe the front of the house. Theodore Hartwell. The voice that called out was cultured, almost genteel, but with an underlying coldness that made Sam's skin crawl. I know you're in there, old man. We need to have a conversation. Through the window, Sam could see 5 mounted men arranged in a loose semicircle in front of the porch. The man who had spoken sat a magnificent black stallion, ironically probably the very horse Sam had come to purchase. He was well dressed in a dark suit and string tie, with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard, but his pale blue eyes held the flat, emotionless stare of a born killer. That's Marcus Brennan himself, Hartwell whispered. I've seen him in town a few times. He likes to play the gentleman, but he's pure poison. Sam studied the other riders. They were clearly professional gunfighters, well-armed and alert. Their horses were fresh, suggesting they had remounts nearby or hadn't come far. These weren't desperate men searching frantically. They were hunters closing in on prey they were confident of catching. Mr. Hartwell, Brennan called again, his voice taking on a deceptively reasonable tone. I'm looking for some property that belongs to me. A young Mexican woman who seems to have gotten lost. I'm sure an upstanding citizen like yourself would want to help return stolen property to its rightful owner. Hartwell stepped onto his porch, keeping his rifle lowered but ready. In the fading light he looked every inch the frontier patriarch, weathered, dignified, and completely unafraid. Mr. Brennan, you're welcome to water your horses and rest a spell, but I don't know anything about any missing woman. Brennan smiled, but the expression never reached his eyes. Now, Theodore, let's not play games. My men tracked her to this area 3 days ago. She's injured, probably desperate, and this is the only ranch within 20 miles that would offer shelter to someone in her condition. Like I said, Hartwell replied evenly, I haven't seen any Mexican women around here. Just me and my cattle. One of Brennan's men, a wiry individual with a scraggly beard and nervous hands, spoke up. Boss, we could search the place proper-like. Wouldn't take but a few minutes. Sam felt his pulse quicken. From his position by the window, he had a clear shot at 2 of the riders, but taking on 5 professional gunmen was close to suicide. Still, he found himself checking his Colt 45, making sure it was fully loaded. That won't be necessary, Jenkins, Brennan said smoothly. Mr. Hartwell is going to invite us in for coffee and a civilized discussion. Aren't you, Theodore? The threat was unmistakable. Despite Brennan's polite tone, Sam could see Hartwell weighing his options. 5 against 1 were impossible odds, but giving Brennan access to the house would put Elena in immediate danger. Actually, Sam said, stepping onto the porch beside Hartwell, Mr. Hartwell already has company. All 5 riders turned their attention to Sam, and he felt the weight of their collective scrutiny. He had faced down rustlers, claim jumpers, and hostile Indians in his time, but there was something particularly unnerving about Brennan's pale stare. And you are? Brennan asked, his voice carrying just a hint of curiosity. Sam Morrison. I own the Circle M Ranch about 15 miles north of here. Came to look at horses. Sam kept his voice steady and matter-of-fact. Mr. Hartwell and I have been discussing bloodlines and breeding stock all afternoon. How interesting, Brennan murmured. And in all your discussions of bloodlines, you haven't happened to see a young Mexican woman, about 25, dark hair, probably injured? Sam met Brennan's stare directly. Nope, just horses and cattle. Though I have to say, Mr. Brennan, the way you describe her makes it sound like you're talking about livestock rather than a human being. The temperature in the yard seemed to drop 10 degrees. Brennan's polite facade slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and predatory underneath. Mr. Morrison, You seem like an intelligent man. Surely you understand that certain types of property require specialized handling. The only property I understand, Sam replied, is land, cattle, and horses, and none of those require chaining or beating. Jenkins, the nervous gunman, was getting agitated. Boss, this is taking too long. Let me and the boys search the place. If she's here, we'll find her. Patience, Jenkins, Brennan said, never taking his eyes off Sam. Mr. Morrison, you strike me as a man who's built something worth protecting. It would be a shame if anything happened to it. The threat was now explicit, but Sam felt strangely calm. Perhaps it was the knowledge that Elena was counting on him, or maybe it was simply that he had finally found something worth fighting for. Mr. Brennan, I've spent 20 years building my ranch with my own hands. I've fought drought, flood, rustlers, and harsh winters. If you think threats are going to make me back down from what's right, you don't know much about Montana ranchers. Hartwell stepped forward slightly, positioning himself where he could cover Sam's flank. Gentlemen, it's getting dark, and there's weather coming in. If you're not finding what you're looking for here, maybe you should try elsewhere. For a long moment, the only sounds were the wind rustling through the cottonwood trees and the distant rumble of thunder from the approaching storm. Sam could feel the tension building like electricity in the air before a lightning strike. Finally, Brennan smiled his cold smile and gathered his reins. Mr. Morrison, Mr. Hartwell, I appreciate your hospitality, but I should mention that I'm offering $1,000 reward for information leading to the return of my property. That's more money than most folks see in years. That's a lot of money, Sam agreed. Of course, a man's got to be able to live with himself after he spends it. Brennan's eyes narrowed, but he maintained his composure. Indeed. Well, gentlemen, if you should happen to encounter my lost property, I do hope you'll remember that I can be very generous to those who help me, and equally unforgiving to those who don't. With that, he wheeled his horse around and led his men back toward the main trail. But Sam noticed that Jenkins lagged behind, his attention focused on the various outbuildings scattered around the ranch. They'll be back, Hartwell said quietly, as the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance. Tonight? Sam asked. Probably. Brennan's not the type to give up easy, and he knows we're hiding something. He'll wait until full dark, then come back with more men. Sam nodded grimly. Then we need to move Elena now while we still have time. They helped Elena up from the root cellar, and Sam was struck by how composed she seemed, despite having heard the entire confrontation through the kitchen floor. Her dark eyes held a mixture of gratitude and determination that reminded him why he had decided to help her in the first place. Senor Morrison, Senor Hartwell, she said quietly, I heard what you did for me up there. No one has ever stood up for me like that before. Ma'am, Sam replied, every person deserves someone willing to stand up for them. The trick is making sure you're standing up to the right people for the right reasons. As they prepared to leave Hartwell's ranch and head into the wilderness towards Sam's hidden canyon, Sam realized that his life had changed irrevocably in the span of a single afternoon. He had come looking to buy a horse, but instead had found something far more valuable, a purpose beyond his own survival, and perhaps, if he was very fortunate, a chance at the kind of connection with another human being that he had given up hoping for years ago. The storm was moving in fast now, and within minutes they would be traveling through dangerous country in the dark with professional killers on their trail. But for the first time in years, Sam Morrison felt truly alive.